everyone. Welcome to the next session, Art to Inspire Equitable and Sustainable Transformations. I hope you're excited for our panel that I will introduce to you in a minute. I am Niloufar Ashtiani, I'm a pediatrician, and I'm also a co-founder of REDX, which is an organization that strives to make healthcare more inclusive. And together with my friend and colleague Megan Milota, who's an assistant professor here at Utrecht University, we will be hosting this session. And as you may have noticed, there's someone missing here today. And we're all very, very sad that he couldn't be here. But as many of you may know him, Chidiebere Ibe is a medical student who really transformed medical curriculum all over the world by making these beautiful illustrations of black and brown bodies in maternal health care, all sorts of fields of medicine that were underrepresented. And I didn't want to let this moment pass without taking a minute to highlight his work. And his book is also available for all of you to see during the conference, so make sure to check that out. And I especially love this. It's like he's waving at us and saying hello. Representation is important. And we know that it's a problem in healthcare. And I, as a pediatrician, see it every day in my practice. And I don't just see it as a doctor who treats patients, but I also experience it in my daily life. And I will share with you a personal example. I usually, when I worked at the hospital in Amsterdam as a pediatrician, I would work evening and weekend shifts, as all of you who are in healthcare also do. And every time I would go into my hospital in Amsterdam, which is also one of the most diverse cities in the world, with like more than 200 nationalities living in the city, I would arrive in my casual clothes, and everyone would assume that I was one of the cleaning ladies. So they would ask me, can you come and clean room number 53? Can you come with me and clean this room? And another funny story is that one of my dear colleagues who was working in the same hospital as me, who was also chair of the board of that hospital, of all the medical specialists, one time, on a Sunday, he was trying to open a door to our pediatric staff room, and he was having trouble using his key. And one of the guards came by and assumed that he was trying to steal the computers inside and almost pulled him out of the ward. And of course, these are funny and cute stories, and I never mind being confused for one of our cleaners who are awesome, hardworking ladies. But it does speak to a certain mentality that we categorize certain people as a physician, a nurse, cleaning lady, and sometimes we have trouble intersecting between all of these. And it's not just the medical profession. We're here today to talk about art and to be inspired by cultural sector and design and find new ways to resolve problems that we face in healthcare. But we have to understand that our cultural sector is also very much underrepresented when it comes to minorities. And this wonderful woman, who is called Nagarey Willemsen, did her graduation project on exactly this topic. And I really recommend her courage, because she did something that I'm not sure I would have been able to do as a recently graduated student. But you can see her at her graduation in front of a mic, a golden mic, I think, if I can see correctly. And she's reading out a letter where she speaks about her experience as a black student at Gerrit Rietveld Academy, which is the art academy in Amsterdam. And she was one of two art students who were black, who were studying arts at the time. And this is still true today, that people from different minorities are much underrepresented in all of our art schools. So this means that whatever collaborations we have with the arts field, it will be biased to some point. And yesterday we had a session on AI where we were talking about AI-generated pictures and photography, and how also everything that comes out of these new technologies is, again, biased. So it's up to us to make sure that we provide it with the right and complete information. So, moving on to the presentations of our guests. And I will have a variety of pictures in between talks just to cleanse your palate and make you ready for the next talk. So we will start today with the wonderful Maria Koyik, who is a Dutch artist from Groningen. Welcome, Maria. She used to work as a nurse, which I didn't know until today, so more respect for you. She did all sorts of community and art projects from waste for various museums all over the world. And she uses her own experience as a patient to talk about all the waste that is used within healthcare. So I can't wait to hear your talk in a minute. And before you stand up, Maria, I would like to introduce the other panels as well, so that you know what is in store for you guys. The second speaker will be Malone Mukwende. He's an award-winning medical student from the UK and writer of Mind the Gap, which I think many of you will know. And he will talk about his experience as a medical student, but also as an entrepreneur, and his visions on how to improve healthcare when it comes to diversity and inclusion. And our last but not least speaker will be Tobias Rinke de Wit, who's a Dutch professor, molecular biologist, sorry about that, public health specialist, and he has so many things on his CV that I'm feeling a bit intimidated, but he's a director of the research program of Farm Access Group and Joop Lange Institute, and he did so much research on infectious diseases, especially HIV, and his talk will be more about how can you increase compliance in patients in Africa. So thank you, and Maria, if you want to come to the stage.
Thank you. Hello. My name is Maria. She told me already. She told you already. I will start first with my biggest success, my global biggest success, and this is the video. I think I have to put it again. Yeah. Thank you. 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she told you already, I was a nurse. I was a nurse 30 years ago, now 35 years ago. And when I came back as a patient in the hospital, I was totally in shock, because everything was disposable they used. And for me, it was a question like, what a kind of strange paradox. They make me better, but look at the big slipstream of all kind of waste I produce to get better. And the first day after my operation, I came back to the room, and there were my husband and my daughter were waiting there. And I felt good. I really felt good. I thought, okay, the cancer is gone. Okay, let's do something about the disposables here. And my daughter got really angry. She said, oh, Mom, please, for 10 minutes, don't want to save the world now. Yes. So I waited 1 day longer. And the next day, they cut my bandage in 2 pieces because I needed a breast amputation to get rid of the cancer. And they cut my bandage in 2 pieces. And I went to the shower, and I saw my scissors standing there in the yellow bin, you know, for the sharp pieces. All the needles and all the things go in there. And I thought, what a strange place. to left your scissors there, so take them off. And I brought them to the nurse, sorry. And I said, sorry, I don't know why it's here, but here are your scissors. And she said, no, I don't want them, because they are disposable. And I was like, is this disposable? The whole healthcare is going nuts now, because it's stainless steel, you can recycle it for 100%. I don't understand this, because these scissors come from China or whatever. Comes as a big container ship to Rotterdam, and from Rotterdam to Groningen, where I live, and then one cut, and then it is collected in one plastic bin and another bin, and then they will burn it. So it's out of the zero waste circle. A very bad thing, because it's gone. You can't use the stainless steel anymore. More than. So I thought, okay, I want to do something about this. And you know, if you want to make a change, this is a very important, I don't know the word. You know, because these two things have to reach each other. You know, the government, the companies, is the top down, and we are the citizens, the bottom up. And if these two meet each other, then you have a change. And when I started to make this video, because the next surgeon was a breast reconstruction, and I asked my surgeon, can I have all the waste you make during the operation? And she said, yes, it's a little bit a strange question. I've never had this one before. But okay, I will give it to you. And the breast reconstruction is from my belly. They made a new breast. And it's a 10-hour surgery. And after 10 hours, I woke up from anesthesia. And the first thing she said to me was, Mrs. Koik, we collected already 6 big bags full and brought it to your room. And if you wake up after 10 hours, it's like, oh, holy crap. Where am I? Who am I? What's happening? And I decided to do something with that waste, and that is this video I showed you before. And the video went viral immediately. But first, before I made that video, even my husband said to me, do you really think you can make a change in the healthcare? I said, no, but I can try. And I will come back later on it. Because I'm the citizen, and I try to reach the government or the big company. I do this for all my life. And I thought, how can I reach all these citizens to make a broad public base to say no? With art. That's a simple answer, but it is. This is my first community art. It's Patty the Swan. Yes, very original name, but okay. Patty is a community art. I collected for 2 months in my neighborhood 15,000 bottles. We picked them up from the street and we collected them. I welded a swan, a model, and we filled it in. And it was because I wanted people show how much litter is on the street. Now it's gone because of the disposal system. But this is about 15 years ago I did this. And also here I had to encounter a lot of resistance, you know. Everybody was saying, do you want to make art from waste? You are nuts. And there were 2 ladies, they were against me. They said, oh no, this is ridiculous. Why do you want to make art of waste? It's impossible. But then Patty was born and they were a big fan. And after 2 months, I decided, okay, she needs to recycle. So we will bring her to the recycle station. I made a kind of paper and said, you can say goodbye to Patty on Wednesday, and then we will bring her to the recycle station to recycle her. And these 2 ladies were the first persons who said, oh no, we don't want it, we want to keep her. It's unbelievable, you know. They were first against, then they saw you can do it. And they were. So we had a kind of, everybody was joining it. We were traveling around the city, and that was Patty. And the next project I've done was this. It's a Christmas tree of abandoned bikes. I live in Groningen. It's a student's place. A lot of abandoned bikes were picked up every month, about 500 pieces. Totally nuts. And also here, I had to get through the resistance. Because I decided, the local government said, we have no money for 2 Christmas trees, we can only afford 1, so only 1 Christmas tree. And I was walking through the city and I saw a boat picked up all the abandoned bikes from the canal. And I thought, maybe we have no Christmas tree, but we have material to make one. So I called the local government and said, I can make a Christmas tree of abandoned bikes. Oh, a little bit quiet. When do you want them? Oh, tomorrow. Yeah, that's okay. So I welded with 6 students this tree. It's 11 meters high. And the first year it was standing there, everybody was like, a Christmas tree of abandoned bikes? Are you nuts? Second year it was staying there again. And the people get used to it. And they were also proud of it, you know? And the third year, the local government decided to buy a plastic tree instead of this one. And also, there was a demonstration. We want to have the Christmas tree back. What I want to learn you is, if you want to make a movement, you always have to go through the resistance. Keep that in mind. This is wilde orca. Wilde orca, there's a big orca, of course. It was a big fish. I made on real size an orca, so she's about 14 meters. And there was a kind of flash mob. I asked the people on Sunday morning, at 11 o'clock in the morning, to pick up a waste grabber from the canals around the center and get into to collect all the waste and bring it to the orca in the middle of the center. In 1 hour, we collected about 800 kilos of litter. It's unbelievable. She lay there for 1 week, and then she was gone, of course, and she told the story. I've been in Africa, and I will show you this. It's a small movie. It's not a professional one, like the first one. But I just want to show it to you because you see the process of making a community art and what happened to it. Thank you.
I'm going to change.
No. Why?
I want to look fabulous. This is a big day for us today. The unveiling of the rhino.
Makes me happy to see this video again. It was such a great time. A funny part of this one is also I tell people, give identity to waste, because if it has no identity, you will throw it away from, like the IKEA shit. It has no identity, you know. You saw in the beginning the frames of the chairs, and we got it from another school. I asked the president of the school, can I have all these frames, because it's there laying between the chickens and the goats, and can I have it because I can make a piece of art of it? And he thought, a piece of art, you're totally nuts, but okay, you can have it, please take it. But then, when the unveiling of the rhino there was, he came and he said, that's my rhino. And I want to have it on my square, on the school square, I don't know the word. Because all the frames were for me. So it is my rhino. And that's the funny part. You give identity to some waste, and then, in the form of a rhino, he wants it back. And before, he didn't knew he had frames there laying between the chicken and the goats. Very important. If you want to change something about the waste, of course. Here is Sushi the flamingo. A flamingo made in Bonaire. And here I reached a lot of people, because we asked a lot of people, please help us with collecting pink waste. All the awful crocs with the most worst design ever, but okay. There were so many pink waste. I could make about 50, 80 flamingos, I think. It's unbelievable. Bonaire has one side, it's very clean on the island, and the other side, all the big trash came, unbelievable, on the beach side. I work with a lot of small NGOs there, Stinapa, 1 minute pickup, cleanup, beach, I don't know. And when we left the building, you know, when we were home and we left Sushi at Bonaire, also there was a kind of permit. She could stay there for 2 months in the local square, the most central square in Bonaire. So they want to bring her to the school where she was made. But because I worked with a lot of people, they said, ho, but it's our Sushi the flamingo, we made that one. And she has to stay there on the local square. And it was not my choice, but it was working, you know. It was not my flamingo anymore, but all the local groups were saying, it's our flamingo and we want to have her here. And so she stayed for 2 years on the local square. And now she's gone, I think. I don't know where she is. But also work on a broad public base. This is in Brasilia. I made a kind of dinosaur. And here we have a system, people collect the waste and they live from it. So we had to guard to protect the waste. Sorry, sometimes I forget words, but okay. We had to guard the waste. Otherwise, all the people, the catadores who live from all the waste they pick up from the street, the waste pickers, they will pick it because it's money. So make waste valuable. For me, it's one thing. But also this was, so that's very important. Yes, sorry. Okay. But you think, okay, very nice, all these stories about all the community art pieces, but did you really reach the top down? because I'm still working with art because I want to show people the same waste on a pleasant way. You know, you make a beautiful flamingo of it and people will look at it. They will make pictures of it. If you show the same garbage in garbage bags, nobody will mention it. And if you show it on a pleasant way, I hope always people will make their own conclusion. Oh shit, that's a lot of waste. And they picked it up from all the beaches. Oh shit, we have to do something about it. You know, that's the way how I work with art. And also, the first movie I showed you of my operation waste, I can tell you it reached a big company. It reached Mölnlycke. Maybe you know it. It's very important in the operation room. It's also a company who makes diapers. It's not quite sexy, I know, but it's a big, big company. It's working worldwide. And I will show you the result. So I will tell you, you can really make a change. That's what I want to tell you. But first, I want to show you the result, the answer of Mölnlycke. I'm very proud of it because I told you, even my husband said, do you really think you can change the healthcare? And I answered, I told you, no, but I can try. And now, 2.5 years later, I can show you this result. You can make a change if you reach the top down as a bottom-upper. So I want to end this one, my last movie I made, with a question. If we cause a problem, we can solve it too. So plastic, we have enough of it. That's the answer. So we have a lot of work to do. And I will end with this phrase of Einstein: nothing happens until something moves. So let's get work on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And on the topic, keeping to the topic of change in healthcare, I'm going to be talking with you today about some change that I made in healthcare. But as mentioned at the start, we have some artwork which is just to differ your palette throughout this talk. So I know a lot of the room here is medical professionals and people who are aligned to medicine. And I wanted to start by asking a very quick question. How many of you know what meningitis looks like? And could you put your hands up if you know what meningitis looks like? Okay, amazing. Now, keep your hand raised if you know what meningitis looks like on darker skin, so like on my skin tone. Okay, so like 75% of hands went down. And that's exactly the problem that I noticed at medical school. We were being taught how to identify different signs and symptoms of healthcare conditions solely on white skin. And the issue with this was exactly what I just showed, that as soon as your patient comes in and they don't have white skin, immediately you have a problem. Unfortunately, I'm not sure about the US, but the way we're taught in the UK, we are taught almost a pattern recognition way of looking at things. Looking for the bright red rash, looking for the sandpaper rash, looking for the bright red tongue. And a lot of the time as a medical student, you can kind of just get into this training method of just looking for patterns. And for me, I noticed that I couldn't even diagnose myself. And I know that sounds extremely selfish, but everyone who goes to medical school has seen something come up on their skin and immediately diagnose themselves. And unfortunately, for me, it wasn't working out. And I knew that there was something that we had to do about this. And in 2020, I co-authored a handbook called Mind the Gap, which is a clinical handbook of signs and symptoms on darker skin. And just out of curiosity, has anyone heard of Mind the Gap or read Mind the Gap? Okay, cool. Okay, that's a lot of people. I wasn't expecting that many people. But Mind the Gap essentially is a handbook which shows how conditions present differently on darker skin tones. So we have pictures such as eczema, chickenpox, your occasional rash, just showing doctors and medical professionals what this looks like on darker skin. I think for me, the vision when creating this handbook was always creating a tool which allowed people to be able to see what other conditions look like on darker skin. And outside of us focusing on a handbook, which is solely for darker skin, the other thing that I really wanted to focus on was creating a world and a healthcare system where the quality of your healthcare is not compromised simply due to the color of your skin. I am focusing on the problem of skin diseases within the medical industry and medical education, but there's a load of healthcare inequalities that exist. One of those healthcare inequalities in the UK, for instance, is that Black women are 4 times more likely to die during childbirth. And this is something which has existed almost since the 1980s in the UK. And when I've looked at data across Europe, across the USA, this is something which is a common theme within all of these places. And following on from Mind the Gap, one thing that was very important for me was to make sure that we don't stop at a textbook, because I could easily stand here and give you all my textbook and go back to the UK and great, act like the work is done. But unfortunately, once you've read past the textbook the first time, it's probably going to go back to the back of your mind. So it was important for us to keep going and keep executing. And some of the things that we worked on, Mind the Gap in the top left, I then went on to create a website called blackandbrownskin.co.uk. And this is a website which features about 300 images of different conditions on darker skin. So I think another issue which exists in medicine a lot of the time, and I know we're at a tropical medicine conference, is that when we look for pictures of what conditions look like on darker skin, I can almost guarantee you're always going to find a picture of a sexually transmitted disease on dark skin. But if you want to find something as simple as eczema, you'll be struggling. And this is something that I knew that we had to break up that bias that exists. So on our website, you can get chickenpox, you can get meningitis, you can get Kaposi sarcoma, you can get HIV, some sexually transmitted diseases. So there's just a whole range of different pictures that exist on there. We then went on to create a platform called Hutano. I'm originally from Zimbabwe, and Hutano in my native language of Shona means health. And this was a health platform where people could come onto our platform and discuss skin conditions with the community. We managed to partner with Neutrogena and get 3,000 people onto this platform where they were all talking about, I have this condition and I've tried to use this cream and it hasn't worked for me. However, I've tried this and it has worked for me. Because again, that's another problem that exists in the healthcare space for Black and brown people. A lot of the time, the drugs that are being trialed in clinical trials don't have enough representation. So unfortunately, for some people, what ends up happening is that the clinical trial ends up being when they've actually purchased the product and they're now using it and they're finding out these products don't work. Unfortunately, with Hutano, things did kind of come to a close. And I mention this because I think it's easy for me to stand up here and talk about all of the successes that we've had, talk about all of the numbers, all of the people that have read the book. It's even an honor to see people in the room who have read my book in another country. But I think it's also important for me to highlight the failures as well, because I think there's no success without the failures as well. And one of those failures being that building community is very hard. And I say this as a word of encouragement to everyone in the room who is trying to build a community, especially around a healthcare movement. For us, we struggled because 3,000 people in a community almost needs another 3,000 people to be able to manage and speak to each person in that community individually. And I think it's so important when you're going down this journey of trying to create change in healthcare that you don't just assume that, yes, we're going to present this amazing idea and everyone's going to get on board straight away. For me, that was not even the case at all. I even have emails, which I should have included in this presentation, of people who were still rejecting the idea of Mind the Gap 1 week before it was released. However, those same people now are the same people reaching out to be like, oh, can you talk about Mind the Gap, which is pretty ironic. And then lastly, we have a podcast where I speak to loads of amazing people in the healthcare space doing work to improve healthcare for Black and brown people. So we have had conversations about Black women in childbirth. We've had conversations about building a company focused on health equity. And for me, the blueprint of this podcast is to make it a place where any one of you can go from 0 to 1 just by listening to our podcast. At the moment, we have 25 episodes on Spotify and Apple Music. If you type in Mind the Gap podcast, you should be able to find it on there. And again, I just mentioned about, it's easy for me to stand up there and talk about the numbers. And it would be a shame if I didn't include the numbers. Mind the Gap to date has amassed over 500,000 people have read it, and some of you are in this room today. And that's in more than 140 countries globally. And last time I checked, I think that was about 75% of the countries in the world, which is absolutely amazing. At the moment, I mentioned we had 3,000 people part of our Hutano community. Another community on top of that is all of the people that we've interacted with on our mailing lists, sending out different things over the years. And that community has about 8,900 people on it today. And our website, Black and Brown Skin, we're averaging about 15,000 people coming to the website every single month, which means that this is 15,000 students, 15,000 doctors, 15,000 healthcare professionals all around the world needing to know what conditions look like on darker skin. I think for me, it's very important that we create a world where your healthcare is not compromised simply due to the color of your skin. Because I think all of us in this room, if we are really committed to improving health, we wouldn't then be discriminating simply based on people's skin color. And this is a problem which, if we are discriminating based on people's skin color as healthcare professionals, patients then don't end up coming into practice. And when patients don't come into practice, patients present later to the hospital, to the GP, to whoever their family practitioner is. And we know that when patients present later, the health outcomes are worse. And this is a vicious cycle that will keep going round and round. So I'd like to encourage every single one of you to be someone who stops that vicious cycle happening, whether it's reducing discrimination when you're looking at conditions on darker skin, or whether it's being a voice of trust, being someone that Black and brown people look to as a healthcare professional, and they look at you as someone that they can come and trust. And that was just a very short intro into some of the work that I have been doing over the years, but I could not give you my full story in 10 minutes. But I'd love for you to keep in touch. If you scan the QR codes, there is a link to my YouTube channel, a link to some of the articles, such as I featured in Forbes 30 Under 30 last year. I did a Time magazine feature with Angelina Jolie. I also have an hour-long episode talking to Google about a lot of the work, and I hope that can give you a lot more context into everything that we're doing. But thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. This was your last. Okay, good afternoon. This is 1971, and that's me with a map of Africa in front of me in primary school. And that's because I always wanted to go there to probably save some giraffes or zebras or lions or other animals. I was very much touched by Daktari, which was then a television film on Africa. So I always wanted to go there. And everything was geared towards it. I want to be a biologist in Africa. And it happened. I did my PhD in the Netherlands. And I traveled to Ethiopia. And I started working in this institute on HIV/AIDS. And the institute is the Ethiopian Health and Nutrition Research Institute in Addis Ababa. You can see the old building. We started with a lot of energy, changing the building into a laboratory, because we had to study what was going on in the country. And although I started as a biologist on zebras and giraffes, I ended up a bit smaller. It was mostly bacteria and viruses. But still, I was there, and that was my dream. So for me, it was a mission finally accomplished, and starting to work on those big, nasty epidemics. This project was supported by the Netherlands government, then under Minister Pronk, who was the development minister. And it was a 10-year project to study HIV and prepare for vaccines. Unfortunately, as we all know, the vaccines are still not there. So that mission was certainly not accomplished. But what we did is we worked a lot on HIV in Addis Ababa, in Ethiopia, to find out whether the virus was different, how did the humans behave having HIV positive, how was their immune system, how was their viral load, how was their CD4, you know, all those laboratory things, technical things, white coats, pipettes, and a lot of publications. All kinds of publications came out. It was one after the other. Everything was new, everything was a hit. And yeah, as a scientist, that was great. But after 6 or 7 years working there and speaking the language and you know, finding your way, you start to realize that you're working basically on a terminal disease for which there was no medicine, there was no cure, and all those laboratory tubes that I was holding in my lab with my 50 people working with me correspond to people who I never saw. But those people were living in the garment factories, they were working on in sugarcane plantations, thousands and thousands of people who we followed over time, taking blood every 6 months to prepare for a vaccine. Because if a vaccine candidate comes up, you need to test that in a well-defined population to get the quickest results possible. So that was the thinking. And it was not strange to think like this. But then, on the other hand, these are human beings. And those tubes correspond to them. And the more you get into a project like this, the more you get acquainted with the people. You go to their houses, you talk to the people, you see who is getting HIV and who not. And you start to become friends. And then you realize the magnitude of this disaster. And this happened particularly in 1996. I remember that was the year that antiretroviral treatments became available for everybody in the West. 3 drugs in Europe or the United States, and your HIV was chronic. It was not a death verdict anymore, it was just a chronic disease. So we could prevent basically the graveyards. Here's the graveyard in Bundera in Zimbabwe. Every corner of the village there was a graveyard. But now there was hope. There were drugs. And we could save lives. Unfortunately, those drugs were not available for Africa. Well, they were, but if you paid $15,000 per person per year, that's something ridiculous and impossible. So this is how feelings came up of anger and of, yeah, something has to be done about this. In 1996, the drugs were available. Our research budget was incredibly big. We had enough money to bring those drugs to the Ethiopians that were studying and to give it to them and to save their lives. And still it was not possible because the drugs were not allowed in the country, there was no licensing, the WHO did not approve it, and so on and so forth. That was the moment that I decided to get out of the lab and use whatever I had in me to fight this disease. And since I am also a musician, well, an amateur musician, and also I love theater, I thought let's at least move towards this kind of art and see what we can do in terms of prevention. So I wrote, together with two good friends, the first soap on HIV on Ethiopian television. And that works very easily because Ethiopian television has 2 channels, 1 and 2. And the country is 50 million people then. So it's around 25 million people watching something like this. So we made a short series on the Friday, Saturday and Sunday night called Yumaleda Teza. And it was the first soap on HIV/AIDS. It was the first time that people were talking about HIV/AIDS and that they were acting around HIV/AIDS on television. Because the country was a very, and still is, a very religious country with Orthodox Christian backgrounds, and there was silence about HIV. Nobody talked about it. In this play, there were 2 sisters, twin sisters. One sister was a party animal. She went everywhere, and she had a lot of fun. And the other one was a nurse. And the nurse was always taking care of HIV patients. But what happened is that the nurse who was taking care of HIV patients, she became HIV positive, and the party animal remained HIV negative. And why was this? Because her husband went out to the party animals and got infected. This was a very simple story, but it just demonstrated anybody can get HIV. Whether you are living a decent life, whether you're living a little bit less, whether you're living as a man, as a woman, as a child, anybody can get it. So that was the message also. And the next day, I got a phone call from the hospital after the film was on the television. And that was the actress who was playing the HIV-positive sister. And she was attacked on the street with stones because she played somebody who was HIV positive on television. And that shows you how big the stigma was. And I felt horribly ashamed. Then I thought, okay, let's move into music as well. And here's a newspaper article. What we did is, in Addis Ababa, is we combined a white-faced band, which is over here, all expats, with a front row of Ethiopian singers and dancers. And because we are a combination of those two, we were allowed suddenly to go into the studio and to really show something and to go on television, because the Ethiopian singers would never get a chance. So we started in a maybe kind of a nightclub kind of atmosphere, but moved then towards recording songs with Getachew Gadiza, who was then a very famous singer. And this was the first time he sang about HIV and safe sex. And it looked a bit like this, if it works. Then maybe it doesn't work, then I'm saved. Push it once again. I'm afraid it doesn't work, but that saves me from a lot of shame, so I'm not too, not too frightened. Anyway, so when you do things like this, in the Ethiopian context, you get a lot of friends, but you also get enemies. And one of the big enemies was the church, because we were actively promoting condoms on stage. We were throwing them in the audience. We were playing, we had condoms on our keyboards, hanging on our guitars, and so on. The singer had condoms in his hands. It was the only way out. We could, prevention. Yeah, there was no drugs. This was the only way out. And then, when it became a bit too dangerous, I had to go to the Netherlands. And in the corridor of the AMC, the Amsterdam Hospital, I met my friend Joep Lange, who was just starting to establish his activities in Africa on AIDS treatment. His famous statement, I'm not going to repeat. Joep very unfortunately died in the MH17 disaster 9.5 years ago, on the 17th of July 2014. But he was the engine behind access to drugs for HIV-positive people in Africa. And I immediately felt at home with that organization. And it started because in South Africa, there was a big AIDS conference, the first one, with Nelson Mandela there as well. And then the very first project we did was with Heineken, a famous Dutch company producing a famous product. And they were present in 6 or 7 big countries in Africa. And the Heineken on that conference decided to give AIDS treatment to its staff and workers because of Joep Lange. And I had the honor to run this project. So here you can see where it was. It was a big project. 5,000 employees, 3,500 spouses, 20,000 children, everybody eligible for HIV treatment. And we worked on it. We established clinics, we trained the doctors, we had laboratory stuff there, we brought the pills in, everything. And we got a lot of trouble because our colleagues in the Netherlands were telling us, what are you doing? You work with a for-profit company. They produce alcohol, which is very bad. That stimulates HIV, by the way. Why are you treating those people? You're playing God. And then we were approached by Shell. And then we were approached by Unilever and by KLM, Air France. We became the biggest NGO in Europe for a while, providing AIDS treatment in Africa to all those nasty company employees. And we got a lot of criticism all the time. But I still know Joep. He said, I would dance on the table naked if that's necessary to bring those drugs to Africa. I don't care. And that's what we did. Here you see how we test for HIV on the compound of the Heineken breweries. And here you see again papers that came out. Scientific papers, in this case, in The Lancet. But also in particular journals that are read by more people, and particularly also people in the higher luxury scene. And what happened is basically, even though we treated only 37 AIDS patients in Burundi, in the Heineken breweries, we proved that they all started working again. Nobody died. And they became productive again. And then the people in Burundi started to ask questions to their governments, to their ministries. And they said, why do those people in the Heineken brewery get treated and live? And why do we die? And I'm not saying that this is the only initiative, but we were absolutely the first ones doing this in the African context. 3 years before the World Bank started, 3 years before the Global Funds or Clinton Foundation, nothing was there. There was no PEPFAR, there was nothing. Then this, I think, contributed at least to the establishment of the big international funds. Here we see PEPFAR, established by President Bush. We can say a lot about President Bush. I would not vote on him, and I never have done that. But in terms of his accomplishments for HIV, he deserves the Nobel Prize. He saved more lives than any other American president ever did by sending an incredible amount of money into the HIV/AIDS treatment arena in Africa. Then we saw the consequences of treatment. If you take drugs every day, sometimes you forget, or sometimes the drugs are not there, or sometimes there is a flooding and there is no drugs available, or sometimes the toxicities are too bad, so you start to get not adherent, and if you're not adherent, the virus will develop resistance. And I worked on the very first big resistance project in Africa, in many different clinics, to find out how bad is this resistance. Again, paid by the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And there I met Moses Supercharger. Moses is in Uganda, and Moses was a HIV-positive pop star, singer, dancer. And he basically was found because he was brought to his village to die when he was so sick that he couldn't even walk, in his own coffin, in the back of a Toyota pickup. And when he arrived in that village, by coincidence, my colleague, Dr. Sissy Kitcho, was in that village for a political campaign of her husband. And she saw Moses in this coffin. And she decided, I'm going to save this guy. And she did. So Moses became a hero. And he came to the Netherlands, and he became a big activist. And that's how he also came in my house. And he got involved with my children, who were just starting a band themselves. You see my daughter here. And Moses was playing with them and singing a song. And then he invited them a couple of days later, when he was back in Uganda, to come over to Uganda and to play with his band and travel and make a tour. He even bought the 2 tickets. Well, have you ever seen an African colleague buying 2 tickets for your 2 privileged white children? I mean, it was incredible. I was allowed to join as a manager. I had to pay my own ticket, of course. And then they made a tour through Uganda. The song that they wrote became a hit. And they raised money for HIV. Again, I cannot show this one. Oh, I can show this one. This is the song.
Every minute, every hour, every day. Children are dying every minute. We're not even crying because we don't know it. Don't know it. We should open up our eyes. We should listen with our ears. Because we're not blind. Let's stop those tears.
So you can see, activism can jump generations. You can live it and you can show it to the next generation. Give me 2 more minutes. That's it. Then I became a professor after all this work. And I still remember the very important oath that you have to make, which is not only doing science, but also to take your responsibility towards society. We are not there to just collect knowledge and publish papers. Those papers have to be translated into action, into different policies, into new things that happen. And therefore we should teach the next generation of public health students. Teach the next generation of PhD students and have their nice PhDs published. And what we also should do is we should talk to the media. Be open about things. During COVID, I was appalled by the fact that the Netherlands government was just concentrating on COVID in the Netherlands with a tunnel view. And there was not even a European vision on it. Belgium closed their shops, the Netherlands opened it. Germany started to do rapid testing, France refused it, and so on and so forth. There was not even a European approach here. Where was the European Union? It was nowhere. And also what we realized is, okay, now I got, should I take this one? No, it's my office. So we realized also COVID can come back as a boomerang to Europe. And I told people on television many times, their health is our health. A healthy African is a healthy European. Even in the Telegraaf, which is not a newspaper that you always want to be seen in, but okay, at least from my perspective. But you have to reach out to people because it's the mostly read newspaper. And also you have to become more activist in terms of flying. The biggest conference in the United States, with 4,500 people attending it in 2019, it was equivalent to 58 times flying to the moon and back. What are we doing as scientists? We have been working with each other on COVID for 2 years. with our computer screens, and suddenly we are in those airplanes again. So I do think there are other solutions. I've submitted an application to the European Union for all those European Union grants, which have millions and millions of travel budgets, to let themselves be supported by either Google or Microsoft, and to do much more in the area of artificial intelligence and virtual reality. And of course, as a scientist, you should talk and transfer and talk to the society. I'm a member of Scientist Rebellion, which is the scientific arm of Extinction Rebellion, because for me it was very clear. I had the privilege, in brackets, to live through two big epidemics of mankind, HIV and COVID. These belong to the top 5 of epidemics that ever were described. Yeah, with the bubonic plague as the very first one. The numbers 4 and 5 were during my lifetime. And I decided, I'm fed up fighting the consequences of epidemics, we should fight the causes. And the causes are human behavior. And that's what we have to do something about. So that's why I also became, as a biologist, more an environmentalist again, and started doing lectures along the occupation of roads and so on. So basically my lesson is never, never, never give up. This is the same institution where I went 2 months ago, 25 years later. Thank you for your attention.
So a lot of divergent, maybe also convergent themes here. How we're going to run the rest of the session is we'll start with a panel discussion here on the podium, and we'd like to open up the floor to questions from you. So we want to make sure there's enough time for you to ask your questions as well. So we have a volunteer, Bente van Baarden-Knecht is there behind. Go ahead and wave. She's got a lovely little microphone in a box. It's spongy. She'll throw it at you. And if you catch it, you can ask a question. But we're going to start with a few questions here. I want to start, Malone, with you. And it's something you mentioned as well, Tobias, just using the media or using creative outlets or new forms of storytelling to get your point across. So it sounds like your podcast is super successful. Can you tell us a little bit more about why you branched into that field and, or that genre of storytelling and what you hope to achieve?
So yeah, as I mentioned, I created a podcast, which is the Mind the Gap podcast. And for me, it's always been about connecting with people where they are. I can't sit there and preach a message in a hospital because people are not listening there, but somebody is sitting in their house listening to YouTube. Someone is sitting in their house listening to Spotify. And if we can meet them there, then we open up the door to so many more people. And that's essentially why I did it. And another part of it, I just wanted to have conversations with people all over the world. I don't think I have all the answers, but I know if I speak to 100 people, I could be closer to the answer.
And if I can only add to that, because what I really love about your work is, and what some people don't realize, is that every image that you gathered in Mind the Gap is open source and available. So all of your efforts have gone into creating this work, and you're sharing it with everyone. That was a conscious decision on your part as well, I imagine.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's even the website, there's 300 images on there, like, yeah. It's like a free-for-all, basically. Yeah. But I think a part of it was about access. I think one thing that frustrates me in medicine a lot of the time is a lot of cutting-edge research is always behind a subscription to the BMJ, a subscription to Wiley. And for us, we are so far behind in this problem that if we put a paywall for a subscription straight away, like, we're not going to go anywhere.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think you've had a lot of experience with that as well. Would you like to share any anecdotes about branching out into other genres in order to get your word across?
Well, it's nothing is more powerful, I think, than music, dance, theater, in the African context particularly. People get involved, they interfere when you're doing live performances. It really, is the way to get into people's mind and heart. But it is also sometimes risky, because I can tell you that in the last 2 years or so that I lived there, my telephone was tapped, my children were followed to school. There were quite some challenging moments. I can tell you. But all in all, I think it's worthwhile, of course, because it's a responsibility you carry also as a scientist. And me as a white scientist in Ethiopia, I could take much more risks than an Ethiopian scientist. So I should do that also.
Yeah. That leads me to another question, and I guess I'm going to categorize both of you as scientist activists. I hope you agree with my label there. And what you just mentioned about, standing up or having the bravery to go out and share what you think needs to be shared and accepting the repercussions. How do you think we need to support the new generation of scientist activists? What kind of support can we provide in our generations, in our institutions to continue meaningful work like the work that both of you are doing?
I think especially I would constitute as Gen Z. I think I don't know if I made the cut, but I think it's allowing people to have the platform to bring new ideas to the space, because I think the way science is often communicated, we like to do what works yesterday and assume that it's going to work tomorrow. And I think with the rise of social media, YouTube, you can see how science is now being communicated in ways that 10 years ago we thought were not possible. And I think probably the most prominent example of this is Andrew Huberman. He has a podcast, Like It or Not. It's a really big podcast speaking about science, and a lot of people listen to it. And unfortunately, in a university setting, I think ideas like that could often be rejected because it's not the traditional write a paper, publish it, speak about science in that way. So just allowing people to come to the table with novel ideas and seeing where it goes.
Yeah. No, I agree. And it's for next generation global health heroes, I would say. One of the biggest challenges we will get is fake news. It's already all over the place, and that's going to grow. And with artificial intelligence and all the possibilities there, more and more and more fake news will come up. So I first of all see the next generation of global health scientists as fighters against this, as guardians of the truth. But the truth they should not keep for them, but they should spread the truth, because it is a very strong counterforce against, let's say, fake news. That's one. Secondly, I think you need to realize that scientists are often now, either not taken serious or even attacked, or verbally, and even worse. There is something around science that the society doesn't like, and that is going to grow. And I saw it with Marion Koopmans, one of the big corona scientists in the Netherlands. She was in a PhD defense together with me for a student, and she came up very late in our taxi because she cannot travel by train through this country because she gets harassed. I mean, this is also something that is going to happen more and more, because global health scientists are going to talk about the environment more and more, because that will be the biggest challenge. And you can see, even with the elections of today, how important the environment is for this country. Not. And this is going to grow. So they will meet a lot of resistance. So the next generation of global health scientists needs to get trained on this and to cope with resistance and not giving up, and be clever and find your way out. That's another very important one.
Yeah. So if I combine those two, it's not only just finding new ways to spread your message, not just with the scientific protocols of, starting with your research and publishing a paper, but maybe being more open and supportive of exploring other means of sharing, but also maybe some kind of support or training in how you bring out a message when people may not be very, very positive about the message itself. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm looking out to the audience now, and Benta's going to stand up, and she's got her yes. Wonderful. Let's start with some questions here. You have to hold it real close. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for the session. So Malone, I have a question for you. Thanks so much for your input and your efforts. I am so proud of what you're doing, because as a medical professional myself, sometimes you're like, where's everyone? am I in this alone? So you're doing very, very well. Thank you so much. And to give you some more compliments, because I'm very proud of what you're doing. I think we're underestimating what the impact of what you're doing is going to be. And for the generation after us, I think they are really going to appreciate it a lot, because there are more and more black, brown, in-between colors being everywhere, underrepresented in the health sector. So it is going to create an impact. Please look for collaborations wherever, and let's make this be known, because there is a gap, a huge gap. And when it hits you, that is when you realize this is a gap. And until it hits you, you don't realize how big the gap is. And the first speaker, I can relate to what you said, because I always get the question, are you from the kitchen? Are you coming to clean the room? And I thought when I finished my residency, finally become a gynecologist, it will stop. It never stops.
Never stops.
So this is something we all have to work on, and we all need education on that. We also have our own judgments. Everybody does. Yes. And we need to work together as a global community to create this awareness, whether it's color difference in health sector, whether it's color difference in normal life. Thank you guys so much. And I would advise you to at least have some mentees. If you don't have, please do that. We need to take the younger ones with us wherever we're going. If you have mentees, please get sponsors. Do sponsor some of these younger ones. We need to take them with us wherever we are going. They need to take up from us when we are not there anymore. Thank you so much. I'm proud of
Wonderful.
all of you.
Thank you. A really important point, lots of important parts there, but about mentorship. I feel like a lot of the work that we do, we talked about this in the last session, is craft-based. It's something that, it's craftsmanship, it's learning together, and that's so important. That's one of those ways to raise, or raise, to help train and empower the next generation of science scholars, heroes, is through mentorship. Thank you for that. I see a question there.
Thank you, everybody, for the interesting presentations. I have a question for Tobias. I was wondering if you could elaborate a bit more on the work of Scientists Rebellion, as I feel like during this conference we talk a lot about climate change and what is happening, but maybe some of us are wondering what are the things we as scientists can do more to actually make a statement or take that call to action that we so often talk about. And some would even say we have the privilege to know, but perhaps also the duty to act. And I was wondering if, for those researchers or scientists that want to take the next step, maybe into activism, what Scientists Rebellion can mean to them.
Thank you. And it's, I think, another maybe part of what should happen for the next generation of global health heroes is we should have in every academic direction, we should have compulsory climate education. Whether you're studying history or French or physics or biology, it doesn't matter. So that's something you can even talk about yourself within your universities and push for it. And in fact, big movements are ongoing at the moment in that direction. And you can also teach your little bit younger generation of, let's say, bachelor students or the ones who just started, that they should ask for this type of education. So that's one thing. The other thing is also what I see for postdoctoral, that people who have their PhD and who are still young and doing a lot of research and are academically very strong, they are totally overworked. They work for lousy salaries, they write grant proposals that often fail, and they lose hope. And they want to start a family, they want to maybe have a mortgage on a house and so on. Those people should have a way out. And we should somehow alleviate them from this incredible bureaucratic burden of writing proposals of 150 pages to the European Union. That can be done much more simple. So these are a couple of suggestions I would have. Scientist Rebellion is an independent group trying to come up with data. So that's the other thing, what you can do as global health people, whether you are a bachelor, a master, or a PhD, or a postdoc, create data on Africa, on the climate changes and the consequences of it, for the cholera outbreaks, typhoid outbreaks, for dengue that's spreading much more, for malaria that's coming up. Create data and make them public. Like we did 20 years ago with Heineken. Create 37 patients that were cured. Well, cured, they were put on drugs and they could work. And talk about it. So that's what you can do in the next generation.
And if I can add something to that, it kind of links also to the representation question of the former person in the audience, is that one of the things that we should also teach in medical school, for example, is medical history. Like, where is our practice, good clinical practice based on? And you cannot go around the fact that it's based in colonialism, that a lot of different ethnic groups were marginalized within this process, which then has the consequence of health and trust issues that we face today. So when you talk about expanding on education, I think medical history should be part of our mandatory medical curriculum as well. And there are many other factors that should be incorporated within the system. And I'm sure, Malone, you also have things you would like to add to that.
Yeah, I think when we look at medical history, I always like to question what our evidence base is. And I think having an understanding of what our knowledge base comes from allows us to know how we can move forward. I think there is a massive misconception or maybe assumption that we make, especially in Western countries, that Western science is the pinnacle of science and everything else in the world doesn't matter. And I think, especially for me, like one of the things on the side that I'm looking to do eventually is to build a hospital. But it will be naive of me to think that, let's say if I wanted to build a hospital in Zimbabwe, that me living in the UK would know how to build a hospital in Zimbabwe. Like, the honest truth is just go to Zimbabwe and let Zimbabwean people tell you how to do it and learn from them. And I think sometimes in the West, we have this assumption that science from the University of London, for instance, will cure everything in Africa and they don't know anything and we'll go there and do everything. So just question the history so that we don't repeat what happened previously when we're putting in initiatives today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Are there any other questions in the audience? This is your chance.
Maybe if you allow me to come back to Maria, because she left.
Definitely,
And what we have to realize is that the medical profession is a big polluter. The 10 academic hospitals of this country produce as much waste and environmental pressure as Tata Steel. But medical doctors are not trained in this at all. They prescribe whatever is good for the patient. They think about the patients, which of course is their task. But they forget about the environmental pressure they generate by their choices. And you can have an asthma inhaler that does nothing with the ozone layer, but you can also have an asthma inhaler that has 1,000 times worse effect. Doctors should at least be aware of what they prescribe.
But is that the responsibility of the physicians, or should that be more the manufacturers that should be maybe with policies also withheld to a certain standard? Because if I look at myself as a pediatrician, there are so many factors that I count into my practice. I really want to connect with my patient. I want to offer a consult that is to their level. I try to build a rapport, and then I have to do a differential diagnosis. And then obviously we can incorporate some of this knowledge into protocols, but I have a bit of the same reservation. I don't know how the audience thinks about that, but when it comes to cost effectiveness, I'm like, okay, you know what, I don't care. I want the best for my patient. I should maybe have a little bit of more insight, like which treatment is more effective, like efficacy, yes, but when it comes to cost, like, I don't care. I want the best treatment for each of my patients. That might be naive on my part, but like, where does it begin and when does it end? Our own responsibility, I wonder.
That's the multi-million-dollar question, of course. I think it's a shared responsibility. if doctors are a bit more aware of the, let's say, negative side effects of saving one person's life for the community's life, yeah, that would help. I think it's also responsibility of the patient to every now and then ask a question. I mean, how many patients nowadays ask a doctor, what does it cost, doctor, what you just prescribed to me? Is there a generic version? Why would they ask this? They would only ask this when they get rewarded for it, maybe by their own insurance company. Because,
Yeah, but if I can...
and the insurer, of course, will try to reduce costs. So there is a lot of market failures
But
there.
there's also, we have to understand that hospitals are a business. And when you offer a solution that might, on short term, alleviate the cost of a department, you're often then asked to not go on with your project because in the end, they will get less income from assurance. And then, so there is this whole system now within hospitals where we are kind of building a business and gaining money and funding on what we are doing and treating. And I think that incentive needs to change, and I don't think that can come from the medical profession. I guess that's my message.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. It's politics who plays a role there, and
Politics
I think medical
play a role.
care is not a market.
Yeah.
I think if we tie that back into Maria's first talk, just trying to find the ways with which you, in your own sphere of influence, can try to bring your message across to, you know, in the dual directionality, meeting
Bottom
somewhere.
up, top down.
Yeah, and leading to policy change. I think we have time for one
last
more
question. Yeah, perfect.
Yes. Ooh.
Well done.
Thank you for this. I would like to hook in on the discussion that was going on with the group here. I really appreciate all the things that have been said and shown here today. But I think that if we don't start, nobody starts.
Exactly.
So, and just to give like a minor example from our gynecology department that I worked, like all our younger students have to give presentations. And they were advised to give presentations on something that has an impact that we do as medical doctors on the environment. And one of them actually looked up the difference between ibuprofen and diclofenac and water pollution. And she found out that there was a big difference between those. And the gynecologists decided, like, okay, if there is such a big difference, we're gonna just stop describing one of them. And these are like tiny choices, but these tiny choices make the difference. So it's
amazing
us
example.
that has to start, in my opinion. So that's what I wanted to start.
Yeah, thank you. Now, in the spirit of that, I love that take-home message. I would like to challenge everyone here for a lightning round of what is your take-home message? What is the last, in one sentence, thing you want to impart to the
We did have
audience
a question
before we
there.
go?
Maybe do we have time for
one more
that?
question. Well, bonus question. You get
bonus
a
question.
reprieve. Yes.
Thank you so much for all the insights and all the work you're doing. I just wanted to add up on this and the discussion we just had. I think it's not about a physician or healthcare professional that needs to know everything, a scientist that needs to know everything, but an attitude that this person learns during the training they're going through. If it's medical school, if it's biology, if it's nursing school, it's about the attitude of taking different problems we have, if it's planetary health, if it's racism anchored in the system. Without the attitude, we will not be able to solve it, and we will not have solutions that actually can make an impact. So I don't think everyone needs to know everything, but I think we should help each other having the right attitude towards it.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Working together. Thank you for that. Are you ready? Who wants to start?
The lightning round. I think my take home, especially in a room of academics, scientists, healthcare professionals, would be, I think the essence of science is trial and error. And we all know that Isaac Newton didn't discover gravity by just sitting under the tree. It was loads of trial and error that led to that moment and that aha moment. I think I would probably leave you with, like, be the person that's committed to the trial and error and don't give up when the error comes, but continue to trial, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Take your turn.
Yeah, for me it would be, we've seen it with COVID. I mean, when Omicron broke out in South Africa, within 12 days, it was in Amsterdam. So we are living in one world. And global health is global nowadays. So my statement would be, a healthy Africa is a healthy Europe.
Okay, thank you.
And maybe we could add Maria's take home that I loved a lot when she spoke about fighting through the resistance. Maybe that could also be an inspiring message that we take home from her talk.
Yeah. And how about you?
How about me?
Yeah.
I think the importance of representation is something that comes back in my work all the time. And I loved the comment of the First Lady that really confirmed how it feels for me, that how important it is to be seen, to be heard. It's a universal need that we have as human beings. And I think we should all fight for that.
Great. Yeah. Applause.
What about you?
Well, my take-home point would be that it's not worth moving forward without being thankful for those that helped you make that step. So with that, I'd like to thank the technical group behind there who has been working seamlessly to morning, day, and night to make this all work so smoothly.
Thank you so much.
I'd like to thank the supporters, the people who organized this. Joyce Brown up there, she's a champion. Noah Kopla is right there, she's a champion as well. And Benta, as always, for being our microphone goddess. I'd like to thank you for co-chairing this.
You too, Megan. It
Yes,
was amazing.
and all of you for participating and giving us all of your feedback and your wonderful conversations. Yeah, watch out for the phones. And we wish you a wonderful conference further. Make sure to look at all the art. It's everywhere here. It's wonderful. This building's amazing. Be inspired by each other and by what you see here. Thank you.
Thank you.